May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it comes as suicide rates in the U.S. are going up. 50,000 people died of suicide in 2023, and rates have gone up more than 30% in the last 25 years. Psychiatrist Dr. Joshua Weiner joins us now with more on the warning signs and how to intervene to get help. This is a tough subject, but one that's very important. Let's start with those warning signs. What should people watch out for if they are concerned about this issue?
Well, let me first say that suicide is hard to predict, right? So there can be some warning signs, but sometimes there aren't any warning signs. And I don't want people out there who are family members of somebody who actually committed suicide or died from suicide to feel like I'm the reason that this person's not alive. I missed the signs, because in many cases, it's incredibly hard to predict. I even had a patient who I saw in my office. I talked to him and he left my office and ended up committing suicide and dying from suicide. So, this stuff is very hard to predict. Now, the biggest risk factor is if somebody has made a suicide attempt in the past. So you always have to have, be more aware and mindful if that's happened. But certainly if you hear people saying things like, my life is miserable, everybody would be better off if I weren't alive, I'm a burden to everybody, these are things that you absolutely need to be taking seriously. Now, I will say, I see a lot of parents who come in and they're very worried because they have their young child, maybe 7 to 11-year-old, who's making statements. You hate me, I should just die, I should end my life. Parents of kids those ages, really don't worry. Of course, it's not good, but 99.9% of the time, your child is just frustrated and angry and upset, and that's the way they're expressing it. You need to talk to them about finding better ways to express themselves. But certainly when you hit those teenage years and older, that's when you really need to take these things much more seriously.
All right, so age is a factor. What are some common misconceptions about suicide?
I think the biggest misconception is that you can't ask somebody about suicide and if they're having thoughts about it because you're afraid that you're going to plant that idea in their head. Studies have looked at this multiple times. That is not the case. What you want to do is you actually do want to ask somebody if they're having a tough time. Hey, I've heard you, making some of these comments. I'm worried about you. Have you had any thoughts about hurting yourself or ending your life? And that opens the door for people to be able to talk about this. And when they talk about it, you don't want to just automatically give that, reflexive thing where, no, we all love you. You can't do that. That would be terrible for everybody. That's not really helpful. It might help some people. Really, what you want to do is you want to be a good listener and you want to say, look, I think this is pretty serious. I want to help you get the help you need. That's going to be the most helpful way for you to address those situations.
So if you are then worried that you've heard the signs, you've had this conversation, what's the right approach to help someone?
You want to have this open dialogue. You want to talk about it. And I would say this for people, if you have somebody who's calling you, let's just say they're calling you at night, or you're hanging out with somebody, they've not been themselves for a while. They're making some scary comments about not wanting to be alive. And maybe they're pretty drunk or they're under the influence of something. I think it's easy for a lot of people to say, well, they're just messed up right now. They're just talking out, they're talking smack. They don't really mean it. And you would ignore it. That's actually the time that you want to take them the most seriously. That's the time when you want to say, hey, why don't you sleep at my place? Or let me sleep over, something like that. Because when people have had suicide thoughts and then they have substances in their system that lowers their inhibitions, and that really increases the likelihood that they're going to follow through and do something. So this is really important for people to be aware of.
Absolutely. And what are some resources that can help someone who is struggling with mental health issues and suicidal thoughts?
So I would say the biggest one for people to be aware of, and maybe some people don't know about this, is 988. So we know about 911. You call if there's an emergency for a mental health crisis, you can call 988. And there are some preliminary studies that are coming out that have shown that there might be a slight dip for the first time in about 5 or 6 years in the suicide rate in the last year because of 988. So this is a good resource for people to be aware of. And, absolutely, if somebody's having these things, these thoughts, you have to get them help. There's just no two ways about it.
Absolutely. Dr. Joshua Weiner, thanks so much for that important information.